Hello and welcome to another episode of Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey. Today I'm joined by Eammon Jacobs to talk about The Mandalorian Season 3, all of its internet arguments and what it does and what it doesn't do well. But we are going to get into the thick of that, but we also talk a little bit about the Bad Batch and stuff like that, just to play catch up with Star Wars in general. But hey, real quick before we do get into that, if you enjoy these videos, like them, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Helps me out a great deal, helps the channel grow a little bit. If you would rather listen to this as a audio-only podcast, you can find Push Your Glasses Up most anywhere you listen to podcasts. So just find us, do the thing. Let's talk about Star Wars. Eammon, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. As per usual, I have the wonderful job of being the regular Star Wars guy, and I love it.
Yes, and it's Star Wars time too. So it's like, and listen, I'm gonna get ahead of it right now. It's right before May 4th. We're gonna have Visions coming up, so we'll have to work out the timing for that too. But yeah, there's actually we're talking about The Mandalorian Season 3. But there's other stuff we can like quickly touch on with the Bad Batch. How did you feel about season 2 on that real quick?
A huge improvement to season 1. I enjoyed season 1, but season 2 I loved. I thought it expanded the characters in a really interesting way, and I loved that it gave us more of a spotlight on Crosshair. He had some really interesting like one-off episodes. Especially the sort of like frozen base episode, which was a real highlight, I thought. I was really impressed. I am still emotionally scarred from the finale, quite frankly.
They're good. If anything can be said about the show, they end the seasons so well. Both the finale last year and the finale this year were the probably the best episodes. The Crosshair one this year could probably contend as well, but like the finales on both seasons are just very, very good.
Yeah, I could have done with a little bit more to do with Mount Tantis and the Imperial plans. Just sort of, I feel like there was a lot of like teasing in there and not enough kind of payoff. Granted, the cliffhanger was, an interesting
sort of literal
season 3. Yeah. Well done.
Apologies.
Well done. That was good. It was bad, but it was good. I could have done a little bit more from the Imperial side of things. But yeah, huge improvement on season 1.
Yeah, it does still have that problem for me where it's the story that it's trying to tell is a little too stretched out for 16 episodes. This could be a 12. And then, you don't have to split up those 2-parters into 2 episodes that are released on one day. Just make it a meet in the middle. And instead of doing 45 minutes between 2 episodes, just do 30 minutes between one. I think they could get away with that and it would be fine. I do think that the way that it is not as directly as we'll see with like Mandalorian stuff, but the way that it's tying into the grander scheme of things is super interesting with, it's starting to touch more on the cloning stuff, which Mando also does. But I think that the way that they're starting to kind of dovetail all of these Filoni shows into what is essentially going to be like an Heir of the Empire sort of big conclusion. I think that that's just working really well. And, I think it is a little difficult to deal with the way that this one ends, because it is like you get to grow and love these characters and then one of them maybe not there anymore. But it is the way that that's handled is done so well in that episode. And like I said in the beginning of this, the finale of the first season does the same thing, but it pulled that punch. You didn't actually have that happen. You said goodbye to a character in that season with Crosshair, but like you didn't have that that finite farewell that this one had. And especially with a character where like you could tell they were building to something the whole season, because you saw him start to be a little less of, you know, a humanoid abacus. He was like actually being a little bit more of a human, and having a little bit more emotion and having a little bit more connection with other characters and stuff. So that maybe was a little bit extra rug pulled and a little bit manipulative in the storytelling, the way that they were doing that, because they were like, you're gonna like this guy even more this season, and then they did it. So it's maybe a little manipulative, but I think it ultimately was still done, you know, very, very well. What am I blanking on? There was something else that we probably needed to talk about for Star Wars before we get into Mando as well. I can't.
Is it possibly the 3 films that they announced?
Well, we can quickly talk about that. Yeah, sure. I thought that was it just Celebration in general? Is there a show that I forgot to mention?
I don't think so. It's been back-to-back Bad Batch and Mandalorian since January. It's been great.
And the last thing before that was Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Okay, we're safe. It's a lot to juggle with Star Wars now. Granted, there is something else happening right now, which literally just came out. I haven't started playing it yet. You have started playing it with Jedi Survivor. I'm very excited about it, but I have to finish Breath of the Wild first, then do this, and then I will be playing Tears of the Kingdom. So yeah,
also a great game.
Yeah, yeah. We can quickly jump on those sort of news briefings. Of the 3, what's kind of the most exciting for you?
I'm kind of torn, because obviously, you know, there's the Mando verse conclusion crossover, however you want to look at it. That is undeniably tantalizing, just because obviously we've been building to this since 2019.
That's the Avengers out. Like it's the build up
100%. Yeah. So it's gonna be really interesting to see what that culmination actually is. Presumably it's Thrawn, but who knows at this point. But I'm also very, 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 very keen to see what James Mangold does with Star Wars, because James Mangold is a beautiful storyteller, and I think his talents within a galaxy far, far away could be something really, really special, and especially because it's not tied to anything in particular.
Yeah.
You know, it's set well before like the Old Republic. It's, you know, the dawn of the Force, the dawn of the Jedi, dawn of the Sith, presumably, which I think is a really interesting concept. I would be interested to see if they're actually going to mention midichlorians, or if they're just gonna completely ignore that, sidestep it.
I feel like the assumption would be it's going to lean much more heavily on the mythical side of it and the sort of fantasy side of it, and not do that as much. They could, but like in my head, being as far back as it is, it's like Knights of the Old Republic. I would say that that's where you start talking about that, where they're like understanding the science of everything going on a little more. I think with like the dawn, like in my head, it's even like this could be like the Stone Age of like where we're at with the Force and understanding it and everything. So I think that it's going to lean a little bit more on that side as opposed to the like biology side of things, which would probably do better at this point. Like I have no problem whatsoever going into the idea of like midichlorians and to count like, it's your white cells or whatever. Like, but it's, I think in terms of where the story is going to be, you can't jump into that aspect too quickly. So
no.
Yeah.
And I think doing so would kind of detract from what Mangold is probably going to try and do it with a bit of gravitas and a bit of probably seriousness rather than the occasionally goofy side of Star Wars, which I'm sure we'll get into with Mandalorian.
Yep.
And yeah, this isn't to say that I'm not excited to see what this post Rise of Skywalker film is. I think that's also going to be quite. I don't know. It's a mysterious one because obviously it's
I'm excited
be an
for that
Rey.
because I really like. That's the thing is, it's less about the story they're telling with that and more that I give a shit about the character of Rey, and I like Daisy Ridley in that role a lot. So I'm excited for that. I'm sure I'll get more excited about the plot aspect of it or whatever as they reveal that more. But like ultimately, it's about her return that I'm like, cool.
Yeah, same. The only thing I'm slightly concerned with is like, is it going to be another, oh, look, it's the remnants of the First Order, and then we're just going to do this whole cycle again? I would much rather than push into something fresh and new, because quite frankly, we've done Space Nazis quite a lot, really.
Yeah.
And it would be quite nice to see Jedi doing something else.
I think there's a lot of what Lucasfilm is either Earth or space versions of that. So it's, I would say I'm in the same boat. I think the most exciting one is Mangold by far, just because it is new and fresh and we don't know a ton of stuff going on with it, but knowing of the era that it's in, that's just really exciting because we have no idea. As opposed to we have like the culmination point with Filoni's movie, and we have that return of Rey, where it's like those are known quantities that are exciting in their own rights, but there's something that we can already have an established like somewhat idea of expectation for it. So I think new is always going to be more exciting, even if it's not like necessarily the most tangible thing that we can grasp. So all right, well, let's talk about Mando, because we're gonna like, if we're gonna talk about that culmination point with Filoni's movie and how it is bringing together everything from Clone Wars to Rebels to everything else, what did you think of season 3 of Mando?
I'm conflicted on Mando season 3, to be honest. Top level, I enjoyed it. Like week to week, there's something incredibly special about waking up in the morning and going, I can watch Star Wars, something brand new every week. Don't know what I'm going to get. That's, to me, that is quite special. And even on the worst episodes
Andor was the thing that we were talking about that we didn't.
Andor was the thing that we didn't mention, and I feel really bad.
That's ridiculous of us to not remember that until just this second.
Granted, like slight tangent, I got screeners from that through work, and we got them like a month and a half early. So for me, Andor is like last summer.
Yeah.
So I kind of, weird sidestep on Andor, even though I enjoyed that as well. Anyway, I think there's something special about waking up and seeing Star Wars every week. I think, as a kid that grew up on it, there's still that childlike sense of wonder about Star Wars. There always will be. That being said, good God, the storytelling in some of these episodes was just painfully weak, and was papered over with certain cameos that were fun but just two-dimensional, to say the least.
We're gonna have not completely opposing opinions on that episode in particular, but I think slightly different ideas on that. So yeah.
But I, as a story as a whole, I thought it pushed Grogu to some great places that I didn't see coming whatsoever. And I will always love the fact that Katie Sackhoff got to come back as Bo-Katan.
Yeah.
And the arc that she gets in this season was just fantastic, quite frankly. Like, and she's just such a good actress. Like, she's great.
She's outstanding.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn between like just enjoying it on the face value, but as soon as I start to peel back those layers, I'm like, okay, sure.
So I don't disagree with you in one way. I think that because a lot of people had this idea that The Mandalorian was just going to be kind of standalone, that's on Lucasfilm kind of, because they sort of advertised it that way. at the beginning before it was before even season 1 started. I think a lot of people do have a little trouble reaching where I am with the show, which is I accepted a long time ago that this was becoming just another chapter of Filoni's grand story. And so I think I don't, whether it's people not being willing to accept that, or more so probably they didn't expect it to kind of dovetail that way. I think that could be a roadblock for a lot of people with the show, especially in this season. I think I like this season more than season 2 though, because I think it has a little bit of the lone wolf and cub from the first season, but I think it does a better job of doing the overall story, like connecting to the grander scheme of things, than season 2 did. So like season 2 didn't know what it was trying to be to me a little bit, whereas I think that this now, like season 3 fully is the grand scheme of things. Season 1 was just them. Season 2 was a little unsure. So I think I'm up on this more than a lot of people are. I also had no problem with like certain episodes where, people complain that it was too dark, and I'm like, they're in a cave. Like they're in a cave and they're underwater. Like it's gonna be dark. Granted, I know that's a big argument for argument's sake with a lot of TV right now, where people are using a little more natural lighting. I think it is sort of it can be abrasive in this show where it bounces back and forth. So the following episode, which is the episode, the Jack Black and Lizzo episode, we might as well jump into that one, since that is probably the controversial one this year, I would say. Yeah. Or I guess the one where there's like only new characters, basically, where they're just talking about cloning. But yeah, I think that there can be an abrasive nature to bouncing back and forth between the naturalistic lighting of the episode where they are traveling through, the caverns on the wrecked Mandalore, and then bouncing into the like very sort of unnatural lighting of sets that are in that cameo heavy episode. But again, like, to me, that's not really a complaint that I can make, because it's like, it's different people directing different episodes. So I'm like, whatever, it's never going to be entirely justified. But I do understand with that episode why people are like, yes, it's distracting to have somebody like Jack Black or Lizzo be a cameo. But I'm like, particularly with that episode is an episode of Law and Order. Like it's a procedural where two detectives are going out and trying to solve a mystery, and Law and Order always does that. They always have a cameo for somebody, at least one, of like an important character that like has something stolen, or like has a family member murdered or something, and it sets off the investigation, or the actual like thief or murderer is the cameo. And so like this happened to be both, but it's one of those things where, for me, because that's the kind of episode it still worked really well for me. But that's another one of those things where like maybe people didn't realize that that's the kind of episode it was, because when you like, there was a long period of time where I was watching like reruns of like old Law and Orders and SVUs, and I'm like, it's ingrained in me at this point where I'm like, I see that in this episode, so it feels right. But yeah, I go ahead on this episode now, because we gotta bounce off one another.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I will never complain at seeing Jack Black. Come on, it's Jack Black. He's great. Yeah. And Lizzo, you can't deny that she's got such a charismatic sort of nature about her. So, in theory, those two things should work. It's not to say that they had like bad performances, although some of Lizzo's lines were very sort of like ham-fisted and sort of
they both
just stuck out. They just stuck
Jack
out like
Black
a sore
was
thumb.
doing a regal Jack Black voice. That's like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Sure thing, Mr. Black. And like they were fun, but that sort of shininess wore off within about a minute, and I just got really sort of not bored, but just like, right, okay, what's the point of this now? I get it. They're trying to sort of, give the audiences something that's not just, hey, look, it's the new glup shito of the week. Do you know what I mean? It's hard because I think we've got to a point now with cameos where it's like, if it's not a fan favorite character or like somebody from nostalgia, i.e., Christopher Lloyd, it's kind of hard to know like what the intention is. And clearly this was just to have a bit of fun, and like it was fun, but I just thought but in terms of the episode,
it did show you like the way that like the post prequel era like was still kind of pushing forward, like and it shows like with Christopher Lloyd's character in particular, I think it shows you that little bit of like there are people that are caught in the middle of like regime after regime, whether it's like good regime or bad regime. I think that they're caught in the middle, and it causes this extra layer of conflict, which is a lesser conflict that's just in the population. So I think like that stuff, I think it did in an interesting way. Not saying it needs to work for everybody, but like I do think that it touched on things I do agree. To shine a light.
I think that was the strongest part of the episode for me, actually, was that sort of the undertone of the,
but it's always good to get
the droids
voices in there.
Of course. And like that stuff kind of worked really well, but I thought that the cameos actually took away from that, because it was like, here's the shiny thing, and then the story's just kind of on the side. And
so do you think if
as well, like the side quest, because that's what it was essentially, it was a side quest while they tried to get to Axe Woves, etc.
He happened to be on that planet.
I just kind of wish there wasn't the rigmarole of this back and forth with Jack Black and Lizzo. I found it slightly painful by the end. Sure, Grogu jumping to Lizzo was fun. That was cute. But I just thought it took away from the actual point of the episode itself. Like you say, this whole in between regimes thing, and you've got the stormtroopers behind them, but they've all got like colourful fabrics on to show that it's a new era, and they're being different to the Imperials. That was really cool, but the focus was on Jack Black and Lizzo, not the sort of thematic, the social political like undertones of everything.
So you basically you would have preferred if it wasn't the like the king and queen needing to find out what's going on situation. You just would have preferred if the whole planet was under control of Christopher Lloyd's like wackadoo old man.
Those two in particular were just kind of pointless to the episode. The whole point was them fighting droids. Like, that's fine. You can just do that. And arguably, I would have found that a little bit more interesting. Like, I just felt that wasted a bunch of the runtime. That could have been doing something a little bit more. I don't know, just more. I think that's the only way I can say it, is like, you had Christopher Lloyd there for 3 scenes. And sure, he is an old man. He's an elderly gentleman now. He's not going to be, running around doing stunts and stuff. But I would have loved to dig into that character.
He should have been hanging from a clock tower.
Of course, there should have been a car. A Mandalorian.
Yep.
Look, come on. One of us was going to make the joke. Come on, let's just...
Well, no, listen. I intentionally forced that awkward pause because sometimes it enhances, and I hope for the case that was that one.
But yeah, I think you could have put something in there, that dialogue where he kind of brings up Count Dooku and the Separatists and why he liked them in the first place because of the Republic, and that was really interesting. And I was like, okay, keep talking. I'm liking this. Yeah. Oh, no, we're back to Lizzo and Jack Black. Okay. Fine.
Well, that's the thing is, I don't like. I think it's because of who they are as people. it makes it feel like there's a lot more of them in the episode, but there's not actually that much of them in the episode. They're just big personas. So I think it causes you to have that be the memorable thing, because like it bounces back and forth and shows them like playing croquet and stuff once in a while. Like, but you do spend more time sort of out in the field and like with the Ugnaughts, and then like where the droids are doing the conveyor belt kind of straight line thing or whatever. I think you spend more time with that than you do with, you know, Lizzo and Jack Black. But I agree. Like it definitely, it feels like they're there a lot because it sidelined Grogu. So it needed to show like them babysitting him a little bit. Right. So, yeah.
I did also think it was funny that there's been, you know, over the last few years, Andor in particular, there's been a little bit more Blade Runner vibes in Star Wars, and this is literally about malfunctioning robots.
Yeah.
And people hunting malfunctioning robots. That's like, I see you, Jon Favreau.
Well, what's also funny is there's an episode of this season where like there's a ton of Blade Runner vibes, but it's not in this one. So it's a little bit strange.
The alleyway.
But something I do appreciate about this episode a lot, because I am clearly like, these are Disney ride posters and this is the castle and like, but they were just at Epcot. That was just a version of like, they basically took the original concept art for Epcot Center, or Epcot, the actual like city, and then just like added some of the geodesic shapes that are on Spaceship Earth, and then said good to go. And as this guy, I loved that because like it was like they're on a monorail, man. Like and
when the attendant starts speaking to them like, you have to go and get authorization from such and such, and I was just like, this is so like cheery in like a theme park kind of way.
They were straight up at Epcot, and I loved it. Yeah, like I totally understand people's gripes with that kind of thing. I think overall, it's still like, it was a good season. So it wasn't even like that middling to me. I do think that there, you know, like any show, it can kind of like ebb and flow. It has its dips, it has its peaks. But I think overall, I think I generally think it did a better job of balancing things than last year for me, because I was such a fan of that Lone Wolf and Cub kind of vibe from the first season, where it was like, it was almost Monster of the Week. And so last year is when it kind of kicked in that I was like, oh, he's tying it more into other stuff, you know, Filoni is. And then it's almost like you can look at season 1, season 2, season 3 as like, season 1 is Favreau, season 2 is the both of them, and season 3 is Filoni, like getting back in his Duffy with and tying it into all of his other stuff. And that's like, you know, I'm cool with that. Like like the fact that this is basically leading into Ahsoka and how that's basically the next season of Rebels. I'm like, yes, because I love
Rebels season 5. It's Rebels season 5. Straight up. Like the trailer for Ahsoka, that was 100% the World Between Worlds. Like that. There was no question about it. Do you know what I mean? So that is Rebels season 5. And I think there was a little bit of an expectation towards the end of this season that there was going to be something to tease up Ahsoka, and there wasn't. And I feel like there was a lot of disappointment there.
I think,
and granted, I assumed there was going to be something at the end. Like it all just seemed to tie together. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but it all just seemed to tie together all too well.
Well, here's my thing.
When's the other shoe gonna drop?
Here's my thing about like how it's tying into stuff. I think Filoni is smart enough after they dealt with the Book of Boba Fett to say we can't blend as much as they did with that, because obviously people like the best episodes of that season were just Mandalorian episodes. They weren't Boba Fett episodes. And so like,
it was Mando 2.5.
Right. And so like, I think that made them realize like, oh, we gotta be a little more cool about this and not like tie it in too much. Because like there's the animated Star Wars fans who are like, yes, give me all those tie-ins because I watch all of them. But it's like, it's not going to work for everybody. And a live action show is going to have a wider audience even than an animated series just in general. So like you kind of have to be a little bit more cool with, you know, not leaning so hard on that. So what they're doing now is this show ends in a way that they can go back to back to basics with Mando and Grogu. But they'll have them, you know, swoop back in time for the movie, and then Ahsoka will kind of swoop in for the movie. And like, I think that's how they're handling that. And which just, it does work better than trying to blend everything across different shows, because it is like, that's where they went a little too MCU with it, was with Boba Fett. And they tried to be like, they were saying like, yes, this is all like tied together, so you're going to have to watch it all or whatever. But like, they'd never really, like I said before, they set up the Mandalorian as like this kind of standalone thing. And yes, the reveal being that there's this little Yoda creature is kind of a big deal, but like they still kind of made it that standalone series. And so you have to find that balance between interconnectivity and just telling a good standalone story. And that's like, I know people have their qualms about this season, especially where there's like, I thought this was about the Mandalorian, and I'm like, it's about the Mandalorian people, bro. The Mandalorian people. I guess.
Yeah. I mean, the whole speculation over that did my head in. Like, just, it's the culture. Just go with it. Christ, honestly, that was slightly frustrating.
No, it can only be Pedro. It can only be Pedro.
It can only be Daddy. It can only be Daddy.
Ash, what have you done to the internet?
I know. Good God. And obviously there's a lot of people being like, oh, it's Grogu. Grogu's going to be the Mandalorian. And I don't hate that. I mean,
no, I think that's fine too, but like,
exactly. He's much of a Mandalorian now as Din was when, you know, he was a foundling, because he was adopted in a similar sort of circumstance. But you're right, it's absolutely about, you know, the people, and I think this season sort of makes that clearer than ever.
For a lot of people, I don't think it does, because everyone's like, oh wait, so Katie Sackhoff is the Mandalorian now? It's like, no. It's everyone. It's all of them.
In the first episode, when they had like, you know, a crowd of Mandalorians on a beach, I was like, this is setting the tone.
Yes. Yeah.
This is what we're getting, you know?
It's a unification of the Mandalorian people, because they have no home. It's them as a whole culture.
Yeah.
Just now, get it together.
That is possibly where I start to run into a bigger issue with the season. Because as much as I loved seeing like all these different Mandalorian factions, some of the armor does look cheap. Some of the armor does look cheap.
The paint on top of it makes it kind of look plasticky, as opposed to like,
especially Jimmy Kimmel's nephew, the little kid, who is Paz Vizsla's son in canon, obviously.
Which also is like kind of broke my brain a little bit, because they stopped having Jon Favreau do the voice. I was like, what? Why would you do that? I don't know.
It's just odd, but. Yeah, his helmet looked cheap. Like, and I don't know, maybe it was just the blocky visor as well compared to some of the other designs, but I think it was just very like T-shape.
Well, I think it was the like, it's like when you do your walls for like paint, where it's like there's eggshell and satin and high shine and whatever, high gloss. I think that's honestly what caused it to like, if you're like, just make it fully matte at that point, because if it has a little bit of gloss, it's gonna just look like the paint is actually part of a plastic texture. So like, I don't know. It's weird.
I didn't like that, but I think there's I don't know where season 3 started to go wrong. I think is the scope. when it starts to go bigger, I feel like it just rushes to trying to get to that massive cinematic scale on the small screen. And I really felt that the pacing, particularly the last few episodes,
it's first half, second half, instead of being like a trajectory that kind of goes up.
big time. And I mean, the trajectory just sort of went vertical at one point. I think, particularly with the retaking of Mandalore, and it had been, they talked about it since season 1 about, it's inhospitable and, nobody lives there. The Imperials glassed it, etc., etc. And then it was like, oh, it's fine. Oh, we're going to have one fight and then it's ours again.
That could have been two episodes.
We live here now.
Yeah, it could have been 2 episodes where they had Din reestablishing it's I can explore a little bit, whatever. Yeah,
I'm not saying that this is Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon where it needs to be a whole season long arc of them trying to retake Mandalore, because that isn't this show. This also, and it never has been.
I definitely don't want
no, neither do I.
I don't even watch House of the Dragon because I got so tired of Game of Thrones before the last season even. So it's the wrong show for that. I don't want that at all. But I feel like they could have learned a few lessons in terms of just stretching out some of those battles and making them feel a little bit more impactful. They retook Mandalore in 2 episodes. I feel like you could have achieved that about 10 years ago if you'd all just sort of pulled your finger out. Right.
Do you know what I mean?
I think, well, I think a lot of that was their worry about going there, right? Because they're like, well, it's poison, so we can't go. And it's that is a little convenient, yes. But I think that the amount of time they spent with the action parts of that, I think was okay. I think you could have spent 2 episodes instead of 1. The episode where Din Djarin gets the captured moment and stuff, and Grogu goes and gets Bo-Katan, and I think that could have been put into 2 episodes and do a cliffhanger where he's captured, and then the next episode is where she comes in and rescues him and gets the Darksaber. The true moment that passes again. Because it is that's where I have this issue in the Epcot Center episode, where that episode ends, but then there's a second ending because they still have to go over to the Mandalorians. So there is a little bit of jarring aspects going on with that. But yeah, for the most part, I would disagree in terms of the final 2 episodes, but I agree that they could have done that a couple episodes prior. So yeah. It is you are correct. It is first half of the season, second half of the season. It is just a straight cliff that goes up, and then from there on out you're kind of up there, except for I guess the Epcot episode is a little bit of a valley for a lot of people. But I'm not on the same page as you, but I do agree that somewhere that should have been worked out.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I disliked it at all,
Yeah. You're being critical.
The fights were insane. It was cool.
Yeah.
And it's stuff that realistically, if you'd have said 5 years ago,
when they all drop out of the ship and the armorer is the last one out, just that's so good.
Do you know what I mean? If you just said 5 years ago, do you ever think we'll see an army of Mandalorians in live action? I'd have gone, don't be stupid. It'll never happen. And here we are. Do you know what I mean? It's quite impressive on that side of things. But I think for general audiences, that will have been wait, what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was just, I feel like it sort of went from 0 to 100 very, very quickly.
Yeah, I do think.
And especially the sort of the Moff Gideon reveal as well. I feel like that was
a little too rushed.
Hell.
Yeah.
Holy, I get it. They kind of were teasing him out the whole season and trying to make him feel even more imposing.
But it wasn't until the moment where he has his breakout, which is 3 episodes before the end.
I was show us that. Like, I don't get me wrong, I loved the way that they introduced it. With Carson Teva stumbling on the wreckage. It was really atmospheric, really eerie and creepy. And that cliffhanger of like, oh, was it Mandalorians that did this? What?
No, I mean,
it was effective. It worked.
Honestly, I will disagree with you on that part. I think that was not a good cliffhanger to say, like, could it have been Mandalorians? Because the audience knows it wasn't. Like, there's zero chance that anyone in the audience actually was like, maybe it was the Mandalorian, so now there's going to be more trouble. Like, no, you know that something else is going on because you're spending your time literally with just the Mandalorians. So, like, it's one of those things where I'm like, that I think would have been handled better with what you were just saying if they just did an action sequence showing him getting broken out.
And this is what I mean. I would have preferred to have seen it.
Yeah.
Like, as cool as I thought the scene was, I would have loved to have seen how they actually did that.
That scene, the way that they handled it, if they did that at the very start of the first episode of the season, that's how it would have worked. The way that they did it, perfect, like set up in the show, just copy paste it to the beginning of the first episode, and then it works the way they want it to.
Yeah, and then the other issue I have with Moff Gideon is that. And this is largely just like a more of a real life issue, is that Lucasfilm with Disney just kept trotting Giancarlo Esposito out to various talk shows. And he was like, I'm going to show up soon. And everybody was like, oh, it's going to be in the next episode then. And he was like, maybe.
Yeah, because we know how marketing works.
God, it was so irritating. After the second time, I was like, we're not going to see it until the finale.
It's also like
it's just not going to happen.
The timing of Star Wars Celebration, I think, kind of got in the way of that too, where it's just like, yeah, we know exactly how this is going to work out.
I did get to see him with my own eyes, though. That was cool.
Yeah, something I definitely was not able to do.
He has got a great voice.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, I don't know. He's such a great character. Like, I really wish they'd just utilized him a little bit more, because we've already had that sort of that teasing out thing in season 1 and season 2. Like,
the rush makes him feel less than, like, he didn't feel like the boss fight that it should have felt because it was rushed.
And I think that's kind of why a lot of people were expecting some sort of reveal, because it was like, right, okay, he's got his own Beskar armor. Okay, fine. Oh, they've killed him already.
Also, right, I don't think his Beskar armor looked all that good. I think the design of it is, but it just looked like Stormtrooper armor because they had the glossy paint job on it.
It just looked like his armor from like the previous 2 seasons.
Yeah, except he had a helmet on.
And I'm not being funny.
Why did he have Darth Maul spikes on his helmet?
Get out of my brain, Mikey. Why the hell did they pick with the Darth Maul design from Clone Wars and just not mention any of that? Like, because he clearly respects Mandalorian culture in some sort of degree. Do you know what I mean?
In the twisted way that, like, we take other cultures' stuff to our museums. In that kind of way, yeah. Yeah,
in that kind of way. You're telling me that he doesn't know about Darth Maul? Like, come on.
Or his culture in general, like at least his species of people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That really frustrated me because when he put the helmet on, I was like, oh, and then just nothing. Come on.
Yeah, because then he also only has like those staffs that, like, the droids that protected like in episode 3. I was like,
yeah,
he could have had the Praetorian Guard are in this season. Why doesn't he have a cooler weapon than those things from episode 3? Because that's they at least, he could have had a staff where, like, the electricity binding could have gone like the whole way. So then at least it would have made sense visually in terms of, like, oh, the horns, he has the full staff where it's the whole way. I get it. Yeah.
But no. They didn't do that.
No. Yeah.
Look, I think, if you have Giancarlo Esposito on board, use him because he's great. He does bring that foreboding sense of dread. And just look how well they executed the assault on Navarro in the end of season 1 of, like, him monologuing to Mando and Cara Dune and everybody.
This should have been as good as his goodbye episode on like Breaking Bad. Like, it should have had that same gravitas where it's like, this guy is terrible, so the way he goes out, you need to build it up and like really hammer it home, because like you need to feel that farewell, right? So like,
and his, I was gonna say spoilers if you've not seen it, but if you've watched this far, you've probably watched it. But his death being crushed by that sort of Imperial light cruiser, I was like, that's terrible. Like, that's
and like not even that, because it was just the flames from it.
Oh, yeah. And I was just,
which like totally, come on. I totally get it, because that's a great way to show Grogu protecting his mom and dad. Which, by the way, I loved
that moment.
So when the episode earlier on, to tangent a little bit, where Bo-Katan is going to rescue Din Djarin, I had this like feeling of like, oh, this is mom, dad, and baby. This is Schoolhouse Rock, the magic number now. Like, this is 3 is the magic number. And like, I didn't really see that many people talking about that until the episode where they're like, I think the one after that, where they are all kind of going together. But like, yeah, I like the way that they handled Grogu's moment after having Jean Esposito become, a barbecue skewer. But like, I am with you where it's just like, this should be Cloud and Sephiroth. Like, this should be one-on-one, where it's just 2 people having a fight, because the stakes are so much higher than like a giant explosion. You can have something they do in the fight cause an explosion. And then, but this is just incidental.
You could still even have the light cruiser crashing behind them, and it would have still looked insane if they were still fighting. Because then you've got a silhouette. Look at how well the silhouette looks in Revenge of the Sith when they're fighting on Mustafar and all the lava goes behind them, etc., etc. It would have still looked cool. I just thought it was a bit of a boring death. I was just like, is that it? Right, okay, this villain you've built up for 3 seasons, and we're just going to cook him in a... No, boring. Do it again. I don't know. I was just really disappointed with it. I wanted something a little bit more epic. And you started to get that, because the fight between the 3 of them is cool. And a little bit surprising. I'm not sure how I feel about the Darksaber being sort of squished.
So I think something with his armor gets lost. I'm not saying it gets lost on you, but I think in a lot of people's instances, I don't think they realized there were robot sounds every time he walked. So like,
it was mechanized.
It's an enhanced suit. So like, I think a lot of people,
it's a combination of the
armor and the tech
he's made. Mixed with the old Dark Troopers from season 2.
Exactly.
That was the combination.
And I think a lot of people didn't understand that it wasn't just a suit. Like, it was also that enhanced nature. So a lot of people misunderstood why he was able to crush it.
It was not that it's a good idea. Iron Man.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't, it's Favreau. We're gonna get there eventually, but like, I don't think most people are on the same wavelength of where you and I are probably just like, probably not the best story beat to do that. I get it. Maybe it helps them unify the people even more because there's no one thing, but like, I think in general, I think it's a bad idea on paper. And I think most people just think that he was strong and was able to do it versus how we probably feel about it on the meta level. But
I think it was, he was quite clearly a Dark Trooper with, a Beskar suit. It was just obvious. Anyway, but the actual, squishing of the Darksaber, I was like, right, okay, Filoni, you have spent a long ass time, expanding this mythology and making everybody very, very aware of how important it is in Mandalorian culture, and pretty much teasing up this whole, right, Bo-Katan leading everybody probably going to ride a mythosaur with a darksaber in hand, and then it was like, oh, actually,
I mean, it's Excalibur.
You know.
Like it's
how
are you going to just like crush the hilt of Excalibur? But
I was just a bit frustrated.
Yeah,
because it's such a cool weapon as well. Like it's just different.
Yeah.
And you know, sure, they're back on the Great Forge. The armorer's probably just gonna handily
make another one.
Make another one.
Darksaber 2.
Darksaber 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yep.
But I just was a bit like, oh, okay, sure. I think those two things combined, I was just slightly underwhelmed by,
because it's part of the same
moment
too. Yeah,
it just sort of, they both clashed, and I was like, okay,
yeah,
sure.
That's the thing where I'm like, that's the moment where I do think like I'm not as like how I was saying, I have accepted the dovetailing and everything, where I'm like, this isn't an end moment, but like it's still the end of a season, so you still gotta like stick that landing. So that's where I'm like caught in the middle, where I'm like, I don't like that they did that in terms of like a single season of the show. But like, if I zoom out a little bit, I'm like, that's gonna be a cool thing to see probably in the future, where like I think season 4 of Mando comes around, and it is just like the two of them having adventures again, where it'll be leading into the movie, where we see like the repercussions of them not having Excalibur, right? Where like multiple groups of these factions, even though they currently are like, you know, all well and good with one another, they even though they had those like very brief moments of like, we don't like you guys, well, we don't like you guys. Okay, but we're actually fine, right? Yeah, we're fine because of the sword. So like it'll show more stuff, I think, in the long run, of like how these factions of Mandalore come together, because they don't have that unifying thing. But like that doesn't help for a finale of this season. So it's like,
no,
that I think is one of the ultimate problems that both Lucasfilm and Marvel have had in their TV shows, which is like transitioning into the television format has been rocky because they have not fully understood the single season arc. They're big picturing a lot of things, and it causes a little bit of like a soggy moment at the end, as opposed to like as hard hitting as it can be. Because this finale, great, but like imagine if they did that part a little bit better. It would have made that 9 a 10, right? So like, yeah. I think they still have some, and this, honestly, I think this is something that Filoni has had for a very long time. I love his stories, but I do think that for the most part, like we were talking about it with the Bad Batch, even though he's not like in charge of that show, he's an executive producer. He came up with the characters and whatnot, but like that show, like you look at Clone Wars, and like it's like 80% of it is great. Where it's like,
and then you get episodes like A Sunny Day in the Void,
right? And it's like you have this juxtaposition of format where like they understand the format there, but they're still not like adjusting that knowledge to like make it work. Because like Clone Wars, you had that problem where you're juggling between characters every single episode, and you're bouncing to this person and bouncing to that person, and then there's C-3PO's episode. Like, you know, it's fun, but like you eventually have to like get your focus going. And I think that all of the Star Wars shows, even Rebels, even like they all have these issues, even though like Rebels is my favorite of the animated series by far. And they eventually got like most of season 1. It's hard to get people to watch that show and stick with it, because that first episode is just Aladdin. And then you have like, what is it? That's a 16 episode first season, right? That's like, or 22. 16 is the 2 middle seasons, I think. And so like,
Yeah, it's 22.
It's a long season to like stick with that mentality and just breadcrumb your way to stuff. And so like I hate and I think we talk about this like every time that we talk about TV, but like I hate what the internet thinks a filler episode is. They don't know. Like these kids don't understand what that phrase means. That's literally just an episode. Like if we want to go like hardcore with it, that's just an anime thing where it's stuff that isn't in the manga that they had adapted into the show. But like what it means for American television in particular, like Western TV in general, I guess, but less so for you guys because you guys tend to focus your shit into like, we got 2 seasons, that's the whole show. But like, which is the smart way to do stuff, really. But it's this thing where what people tend to call a filler episode in American television is just a character-focused episode. It's just an episode of television. So when you say, oh, it's full of filler, you don't like TV as a format, and that's fine, but you need to accept that. So like, and I feel like a lot of people said that with like the Jack Black and Lizzo episode. Like they were like, it's a filler episode. It's like, no, it's not. You're seeing Bo-Katan and Din Djarin like work as a team together, and that's the beginning of them really like bringing the people together.
And it's also widening the context of how the fallout of the fall of the Empire has affected the outer reaches, the outer rim, and it's that political subtext of various regimes, etc., etc. So and
that's the thing is like it's fine. Like I'm not whatever. If somebody doesn't love that episode, that's fine. Like it's not filler.
No, it's not. It's not. It still serves a purpose.
Yeah,
in
it
the
still
ongoing
has.
narrative.
Like they're not just going out and getting ice cream. Like there's purpose behind what they're doing, even if it's not as well done as it could be. So like, but I do think that these series have an issue with actually focusing in on the format at hand, because there are pacing issues that have nothing to do with filler stuff. It's just pacing issues where they're just like with that Epcot episode, as I like to call it, the tacked on thing where they do actually meet up with the Mandalorians. Like, why is there a 4th act in this episode? Like, just save that for the next episode. Just show Bo-Katan and Grogu and Din Djarin like just walking like off from away from the city, and then start the next episode with them meeting up with the rest of the Mandalorians and the ships. Like it's these strange choices that are like has nothing to do with what the internet likes to say. It's just that like it's not properly fitting into an episode format. So it's like I do have those same issues that a lot of people have with pacing, but it's a different point of view on what pacing means, because like I'm just trying to watch a 3-act episode of a TV show. I'm not trying to say like they're not getting to the plot. They're getting to the plot. It's just, they're putting part of the next episode's plot into this episode. And it's that, it's the problem they had where they put part of a season of The Mandalorian into Boba Fett. They're putting parts of the next episode into this episode. And it's like, they do that on both large and small scale. And I do think that's an issue both in Marvel's TV and Star Wars TV. So yeah. Willow is the only one that did it right. And it's gone now because nobody watched it. And I blame you all. I love that show. That was legitimately my favorite show. That was like one of the Disney Plus, like Marvel, Star Wars, Lucasfilm, whatever. That was my favorite show.
Mikey, I'm going to break your heart. I've not watched Willow. I'm sorry.
Watch Willow, you asshole. It's so good. It's so good. And like, I get that people were mad that it had some licensed songs in it, but like, get over it. It's good. It's fun fantasy. Not everything has to be Game of Thrones. Let somebody have some fun.
I will get around to it. I just have a big watch list. All right, I'm sorry.
Listen, this is it's only 8 episodes, so it won't take you too long.
That's not too bad. Yeah. I do have one question though. Like, what do you think about the Gideon clones? Because I kind of liked it. I thought it's adding to that connective tissue to the sequels and the Snoke and Palpatine of it all, which retroactively, I get it. They're adding the backstory to, and it's sort of making a little bit more sense. But I thought it was a little odd to just go, hey, look, I've got a bunch of clones. That was why I was using Grogu's blood, because they're all going to be able to use the Force. Oh, wait, they're dead now.
I don't have a problem with they're dead now. Mm-hmm. I thought it was weird that they were clones of him.
Yeah.
I think that kind of makes no sense for grand scheme of things, kind of zoomed out picture, because it is like, we know where that's leading. So why are we adding this extra step into it? Like he should have, with the setup of Thrawn and how like we expect Filoni's movie to be his version of Heir to the Empire, it should just be like Gideon working for Thrawn. And I know that they had that little setup with, Hux Sr. and stuff, but like, which I loved. I adored that as somebody who loves
was great.
I love the Aftermath books. So like that made me happy.
Mm-hmm. Aftermath trilogy is great.
Fantastic. And then they kicked Chuck out of the entire Star Wars universe because some people on the internet complained. Because some right-wing nut jobs went crazy.
And let's be honest, there's a whole other podcast.
We don't have to go into that. Yeah.
There's a whole other podcast, Star Wars Sessions. I guested on it, and we talk about Star Wars Aftermath. So go listen to that if you want to listen to Star Wars Aftermath.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think that they could have gone a little bit more streamlined with it instead of adding this extra plot point, because it could have been those early stage Emperor clones where they're failing, they're not coming through, because like these clones wouldn't have worked out in terms of what we already know. Like all cloning is failing until like they get it together with like, because this is a broken system now because they're using forced labor from the prequel era, and it's that is where they tie in like the Bad Batch stuff and whatever. So I do like that aspect of it. I just think it was not the best choice to use these are Gideon's clones, because then it is throwaway when you kill them. But if it was set up for like how it leads to Snoke and how it leads to the Emperor coming back, like it would have made more sense as a failed experiment at that point. So
I feel like it was just taking a step back to what we were expecting and what we already kind of know, like you just said. So I didn't hate the idea, but I just thought it was a really odd choice to just throw in last minute.
It's another one of those things where it works, but it could have been better.
Yeah, it's just a bit clumsy. But one thing I didn't think was clumsy and took me completely by surprise was the answer to who saved Grogu. Now, I know there are some people that are not as keen on the flashback to Order 66 because we have spent a lot of time with that era in the last few years, especially like with Kenobi as well, revisiting it slightly and
the Jedi games as well.
And the Jedi games as well, of course. And obviously, realistically, the prequels weren't that long ago.
Well, and that's the thing is like, that's as much as we're spending a lot of time post Return of the Jedi with, the Filoniverse and whatnot, it's still like his main through point is stemming from the events of Order 66. Like everything that he touches relates to that. So like,
yeah, of course.
It's going to show
revisited it at the end of Clone Wars as well, obviously. And I don't know, I just thought there was something kind of just exciting about briefly seeing a different angle of the events of that night, to do with Grogu, because obviously there's been loads of speculation about who actually saved him.
Yeah.
And I am so glad it wasn't like, and here's Mace Windu. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of people trying to be like, oh, the big cameo. And I think what we got instead was actually
keep Mace Windu dead.
Please don't bring
we don't need any more Mace Windu
back.
And
we don't need Mace
that's
Windu
the thing
back.
is, if that was the case, if it was Mace Windu, he literally just got thrown out of a window, and like an hour later, he's got like that would have made no sense.
The timeline would make no sense.
Would have been one of the X-Men movies at that point.
Yeah. I think what we got was subtly a lot more beautiful for, more realistic reasons. Ahmed Best comes back to play Keller and Beck, which in its own thing is its own cameo. Because obviously
I think everybody who has, loved Star Wars for a long time in that moment, even if they were one of the people who was like, one of the fuck Jar Jar people, or whatever, blah, blah, blah. I think they still would have in that moment been like, this is cool. Especially since like it also ties into the Disney Plus game show that they did and stuff. It's like,
yeah,
that was such a lovely thing to do. I think yeah.
It was, again, I don't know, maybe this was just because obviously I'm still on a bit of a celebration high, I guess, but it was just wonderfully like wholesome.
Yeah.
Even though, he was killing clones. Not so wholesome. But for
the right reason.
Well, yeah, true. I just thought it was just a nice way of not welcoming him back because he never left, but just giving him a little bit of closure almost.
It was a moment that he could get and receive his flowers from the crowd, like the audience. Yeah. Absolutely.
And obviously, it was made even better by the fact that he was an absolute badass.
Yeah.
Drifting a bloody speeder bike through what was essentially the subway. I just loved it. It was great.
Yeah, it was great.
My only issue was that people were like, oh, it redeemed Ahmed Best. And it's like, he didn't need redeeming. Like, Star Wars fans needed redeeming for treating him like trash. Like, regardless of what you think of Jar Jar as a character, like, he did not deserve
this was a moment that allowed the audience to course correct. Like,
absolutely,
because of the way that he was treated. Like, he already deserved the flowers. This was just putting him in the forefront on a podium so that people could be like, here you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think as well, like, even on the Jar Jar thing, like, yes, he's a goofball and slightly irritating, but
so there's a lot of stuff in Star Wars.
Has always been in Star Wars.
Yeah,
has always been in Star Wars. Moments of A New Hope are dumb as hell. Like, look, we all love Jawas. Jawas are great. They're mischievous little scamps, but they're goofy. Like, they just are. Ewoks. Tell me, look me in the eye and tell me the Ewoks aren't like just stupid. They're cute. They're great. Again, we all love them, but they're stupid. They are just walking teddy bears.
Yep.
Like, goofiness has always been a part of Star Wars. I think there's a certain portion of the fandom that sort of forget that, quite frankly.
For sure.
And it just irritated me a little bit when everybody online was like, "Oh my god, Ahmed Best," and I'm like, you are the same people that gave him crap like 20 years ago for his performance. There was a little bit of hypocrisy.
Same people who basically
quite a lot.
Ruined his life and really like, they wouldn't have felt guilty if he did what he says he was thinking about doing. But should have and still should feel bad about it now. It's such a weird thing to see people like, finally they gave him a good character. It's like, no, that's not how you do this. That's not the way to handle this situation.
You don't go back and slam on Jar Jar again. Like, yeah. And again, like, I don't know what the rating is in the States, over here, the Phantom Menace is a U, which means that anybody, no matter how old they are, can watch it.
That would be G
So
here.
that is
Yeah.
okay. So that is a kids movie.
Yep. Yeah,
these movies.
Well, that's the thing. Is
to paraphrase Patrick Willems,
all of these movies in America were PG.
Okay.
I think the original, maybe A New Hope could have been G, but like we know the timeline of when PG-13 came in was with Red Dawn because of movies like Temple of Doom and stuff. So like you have, so yeah, it would have been G, PG, and then R, and so everything basically got a PG rating if it wasn't like, you know, showing straight up nudity. And like PG movies had like F-bombs and stuff in them back then. So, you know, but like they're all PG through Revenge of the Sith was the first one that was PG-13.
Yeah, and rightly so.
I mean, even then, I'm like, there's
Mikey, come on. You see Anakin getting burnt alive on fire. His skin is burning away.
Right.
He gets barbecued.
Right. But in terms of where the ratings were when the original movies were being rated, I'm saying it's on almost the same level of some of the stuff that's in the original trilogy where you see arms getting chopped off and stuff. So like, it's not that much further of a jump where it's like, if that was made in the 80s, it would have been PG. That's all I'm trying to get at.
Gotcha. But Patrick Willems said it best. It's like, these are movies about space wizards for children.
And not even Patrick Willems said that, because George Lucas said that. George Lucas has been like in an interview said like, these are for kids first and foremost. Everyone can enjoy them, but they're for kids first and foremost. And it's great that we have like stuff like Andor where it's mature. Like I think like, not like young kids. Like I'm not going to show my 2-year-old nephew Andor because first of all, he'd be bored out of his mind. But like they are still like, you could show an 8 or 9-year-old Andor for the most part, and because
whether they enjoy it is another thing entirely.
And that's still the sweet spot of, you know, the Star Wars audience is that like, I'd say 8 to 12 to 13 sort of is like, that's the perfect age of Star Wars. Granted, I saw it, you know, my first experience with Star Wars was with Muppet Babies, and I was like, you know, 3. So like, and then I saw the movies after that when they were on TV or whatever. But like, I think that's first and foremost the thing that Star Wars always needs to be is at least a little kid friendly first. Even if it's 100%. Something like Andor where it's like the kid friendliness is just that like it's not like there's no hardcore sex. Like, you know, it's not
no,
going
like,
Cinemax
over the top murders. Yeah.
Like you can totally have death and like a little bit of violence in it where there's a little bit of blood, but they even like, because most of Star Wars is lightsabers at this point, they don't really show that much blood. Like the Force Awakens, it's like you get the streak on the helmet.
Yeah. And I think there might be a little bit when Kylo gets stabbed. I can't remember. Maybe not. I can't remember.
Well, no.
It's not when
he gets stabbed. It's part of that face off in the Force Awakens in the woods, where I think something hits him.
He gets slashed, doesn't he?
That's on his face, but that's instantly cauterized. It's his gut. When he gets shot from Chewie, is what it is, but you don't see anything until he hits the wound to like make him like get angry about it. So so even then it's just like you almost don't see blood, you just see like something dark splatters on the snow because everything is blue. So like it still hides it in a way that I think the only time, at least in the Force Awakens, that you see like that's red blood is the smear at the beginning of the movie on the helmet,
which is still really cool imagery though.
Absolutely.
It looks amazing. It's so powerful.
And that's
this is obviously a roundabout way of saying that, you know, Ahmed Best
Wonderful
What a guy.
human being who brought us joy as children should never have dealt with anything the way that.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better.
Oh, that's probably a weird way to end on the Mandalorian. But it was because of he was in the Mandalorian.
Okay, all right. Final point then.
Even before we get to a final point, we didn't really talk about the non-Mandalorian episode, all about the Doctor. So let's just 2 minutes real quick on that. How did you feel about that episode?
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Again, as we were mentioning, Blade Runner vibes all the way through. But I also loved the little moments of comedy that that was set up between Ella Kane and Dr. Pershing, like that dynamic that was fostered. And obviously it was all engineered on her side of things because she was trying to get him on side. But it was
Katie
wonderful,
O'Brien, is
weirdly.
That the actress's name?
It's Kate. Yeah, it's Katie O'Brien. And it was kind of wonderful.
Unbelievable performance by her in that episode.
Absolute snake. I hate her guts,
I was rooting, I knew what was going to happen, but I was still rooting for them to just be best friends the whole time.
Yeah, there was a moment where you're like, this could actually, follow through. But again, that made it all the more heartbreaking by the end when you realized what her true intentions were. And I thought that just played, beautifully against Star Wars as a whole, as a bit of a tragedy. It's a space opera. It was like this blossoming friendship just sort of crumbled because of who she's allied herself with. Do you know what I mean?
And that episode felt sort of like Andor light as well. So
100%.
It helped bring those two tones together a little bit, and because they are disparate. They are this is still more fantasy, where Andor is a little more set in a reality of our perception of politics, whereas it's the Mandalorian is still about there's still a kind of a lightsaber, it's now it's the sword and the stone in space, but it helped bridge those two formulas together, I think, in a really good way, because it was still it still felt like it was shot like the Mandalorian, but it had the actual story tone and kind of stuff going on with that of not quite Andor, but it was standing at the doorway of Andor. So it's
I was really impressed. And I saw some people again complaining that it was filler, and I was like, you don't know what filler is.
This whole season was about clones, bro. Turns out, as much as we said that moment could have been handled better in the finale, it was a very direct setup to something that you saw come to fruition.
Absolutely. But I just felt really sad for Pershing.
He was actually trying.
He was trying. He was trying to be a better person.
Still not a great person. But he was attempting, and I salute the effort. Yeah,
pretty much. I just felt really sad for him. I didn't watch it first thing in the morning that day. I can't remember, for whatever reason. I could late, whatever. And my girlfriend watched. I was not hungover. It was a Wednesday, Mike.
I'm saying.
My girlfriend came in while I was working. She was like, I hate her. You need to watch it now. I hate her. And I was like...
Because you didn't know what the episode was. Yeah.
I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't know who she was referring to either. And I was like...
did Bo-Katan show up and did they fight? Or, yeah.
Do I now procrastinate work? I did.
Yeah.
It's just such... I'd probably say it was... possibly one of my favorite Mandalorian episodes, arguably.
And it's
of the whole,
and it's not a Mandalorian episode,
so
in terms of that direct story, but it's just handled really well. And I think that is the one instance where they kind of turn the camera away from the main story, which was, I gave a whole rant earlier about how they do mishandle that on times, but it's the one example for sure that works just front to back, because it does still like work within the show. It's the whole point of that episode is brought back in the finale. So it's still like, it's not just an interesting look at another point of view. It actually comes back together and maybe not tied in a bow, but like it's still a little bit of a knot tied up. That's, you know, no loose ends fully there.
And I mean, you know, I will be keeping an eye on what Katie O'Brien does next, because that is a beautifully villainous performance.
Well, that's what I was saying. You like, I knew where it was going the whole time. It's not like they didn't hide shots. Yeah, they didn't hide what she was doing from the audience. They hid it from Bashir, but like it's such an interesting thing for somebody to be able to hold that kind of performance where I'm still like, but I like her. Even though I know she's like manipulating the character that is the focus of the episode, I'm still like, yeah, but that version of her is so likable. I'm like,
she was genuinely nice.
Yeah. Well, not genuinely.
Well, just not genuinely. No. Face value was nice.
Yeah. And that's what we do. We always trust face value on everybody.
I know.
That's the lesson in life. The lesson of Star Wars. Do you have anything else to round up for Mando season 3?
Yes, I actually really liked the happy ending. I know I sort of have criticized it for, you know, various the grandizing, the way they got there, and the rush to it.
Yeah,
it was rocky, but I really liked that there was just a random positive ending in Star Wars for once. It was just nice. There was something, again, you know, I'll use it again, wholesome about seeing Din and Grogu just sort of like, all right, let's kick back for a little bit.
Yeah.
It was just nice.
Well, and that's the thing, is we talked about how they don't kind of know how to wrap things up a lot of the time. And that's a moment that if they wanted to say no more Mandalorian, okay.
Yeah.
They just retired on a farm. Perfect. That's fine.
I would be fine with that.
Yeah. I do think that they'll use that as a way to make season 4 of The Mandalorian just about them again. And then they come back for the, you know, the grandiose culmination movie. But like, if they wanted to, they could, and it would work. And that's like the most important thing, is making sure that they find a way to like make an ending work. Because nothing feels like it ends anymore. And that's, you can't edge that way, like with everything. It becomes disappointing after a while when you just don't have a satisfying ending. And so like, at least with this, even though we know there's going to be more with this section of the Star Wars universe, at least this moment felt done. And that's, yeah. Good job, everybody. Cool, man. Well, man, we made this one go. So we got Visions coming up. So
I may or may not have already seen.
Yeah,
Visions.
I know. You mentioned it on the internet.
Honestly, it is beautiful.
Yeah.
I just blown away. It's a cliche, but I was absolutely blown away by it. I can't wait for a lot of people to see this. You're gonna love it.
Good. I better, or else. I don't know what else. Yeah. So I'll work out something in the schedule to get you back on so we can talk about that, because the first Visions was phenomenal. But I'm even more excited because we have all these multiple different forms of animation being used, and I love animation in many forms. And like, hey, you got some British representation in there. Like, you got Aardman
episode. It's so much fun.
That like good, because if Aardman suddenly made a very serious thing, that'd be weird.
It's so, honestly, it's so perfectly Aardman, but it's so perfectly Star Wars. It just Yeah, it's great.
Awesome.
And you know, as a horror fan, there's a little bit of horror in places, not in the Aardman one.
Right, yeah.
There's a little bit of horror in places that I was like, oh, I love that. You know, I don't need horror in my live action Star Wars. I don't need it at all. But in this, it works a damn treat. It's so cool.
Awesome. Well, there's a sneak peek at the discussion we'll have about that. So until next time.